Honor mode is the hardest difficulty Baldur's Gate 3 has to offer, adding a whole bunch of new legendary actions, changing already established mechanics, and worst of all, making it so you have one autosave that should you fail on, the run ends. It's already a tough challenge, but to make things harder, we're gonna see if we can do it with just one character. Oh, and it's my first time experiencing this mode, plus we've got some other extra rules such as no barrelmancy, no respecking, no karmic dice, and of course, no other party members, though temporary companions such as summons are a-okay. With that being said, it goes a long way towards helping out if you like and subscribe, and it's always deeply appreciated. Now, on to character creation. At the request of many, we'll be playing as a Dark Urge origin, meaning we also get the Haunted One background. For our race, we'll be playing as a Deep Gnome, mainly for the Gnome Cunning feature that grants advantage on all mental saves, which is an incredible defensive boost. Our class starting off is a Devotion Paladin, though we will be multiclassing later on, but starting off with good armor and weapon proficiencies, high health, and good saving throws is hard to beat. Ability scores and skill proficiencies end up looking like this, and though it may be odd for now with charisma and con pumped to the moon at the expense of the other scores, trust me when I say the payoff will be worth it. Then we sculpt our handsome protagonist to perfection, and after a vote decide on a strangely foreboding name. Thus begins the adventures of the Bald Urge the First. We awaken on a burning nautiloid with an illithid parasite in our head and memories of our past life out of it, though we do have an overwhelming desire to kill, specifically legendary creatures, so we must have been some sort of big game hunter in our past life. Regardless, we continue on our merry way and find a brain in need of freeing, one that tells us we gotta get to the helm, and since our brain is out of sorts, we decide to trust this one. As we continue on, we get jumped by this strange Gith soldier who joins us alongside our brain to fight against some imps. We're pretty sure she's a legendary creature though, so while she's not looking, we take her armor and send her to an early demise. The imps, of course, really aren't hard to clear out even without her help. Then we arrive at the helm just in time to see the world's worst mind flayer die to a couple imps, but on the off chance they are in fact just that deadly, we start a mad dash towards the control panel at the end of the room, whereupon we tickle some tentacles, get melted by some future prey, receive even more brain damage to add to our collection, and wake up the next day feeling chipper as ever. The Bald Urge gets exploring his surroundings and finds some intellect devourers in the way. Not wanting to have what little remains of our intellect devoured, we just sneak right past. And here we find a weakened mind flayer that gives inspiration and a bunch of XP for killing it. Enough XP for level 2, which grants 2 first level spell slots, the ability to use divine smites, a whole host of spells, and last but not least our defense fighting style. This bad boy is the start of something beautiful, an unkillable defensive build, and this gets us a little closer to that state with a +1 to our AC so long as we're wearing armor. Continuing on, we come across a hand that seems to be stuck in a portal and desperately wants out, so we perform the first of many heroic deeds to come and hack it free. This grants both another inspiration point and also for some reason breaks our oath, causing a frightening Scottish man to show up and berate us. He is also kind enough to give us the powers of an Oathbreaker paladin, which will mainly become relevant later, but it's nice of him to give us some power as a consolation. After chatting to him, we head to our camp just to grab the mask of the Shapeshifter, which will help us quite a lot, as well as a cool cape to make us look extra fly. A little further down the road and we find some goblins with really bad aim attacking a camp full of people, but even bad aim still manages to hit the local cannon fodder. The fight kicks off with us jumping to their aid as the hero we probably are, and thanks to the Shield of Faith we'll be concentrating on for most of this playthrough, the first couple attacks miss us. We down a Hill Giant elixir to boost up our strength and hopefully also make this fight go a little quicker. And a couple of our rather average allies go down here and there, but before you know it we clean up the last of the goblins with no problem. Once inside we punch a rude dude, convince some spellcasters to stay and protect their people from the goblin threat, find out the druids don't much like the ton of tieflings scratching in their grove, and save a child named Arabella from the most murderous of all the druids. Further in, we have a quick chat with Nettie, a frankly horrendous healer who asks us to unalive ourselves should our symptoms get worse, and tells us of a more helpful druid named Halcyon stuck in the nearby goblin camp. Once she's gone, we yoink the nearby parasite on her desk since our brain says it'll be handy later. We also learn how to play every instrument ever while chatting with this cool bard named Alfira, then learn that the local cutthroat children want the druid's shiny idol stolen in exchange for a cool ring, and try and talk to the local wildlife, but the urge kicks in and well, it must have been a legendary creature. Yeah, definitely. Anyways, elsewhere in the wilderness we find what is definitely a legendary creature in the form of Raphael, a devil who really wants us to come begging to him for help with our tadpole. Thankfully though, he doesn't yap at us for too long and he gets the gist after we tell him to bugger off for the millionth time. Up in the same area, we get the Silver Pendant, which allows us to cast the Guidance cantrip whenever we want, something that will be insanely helpful going forward. Speaking of helpful things, deeper in the woods we find a couple of fishy folk standing over a soon-to-be corpse. Turns out we can use our tadpole to exert control over them since they're part of something called the Cult of the Absolute, the same bad guys the goblins are working for. We send them off to go hunt down the owlbear that got their brother and yoink the parasite right out of his corpse. Then our shattered psyche lets us know it's a good idea to start being a drow using that mask of the Shapeshifter we got earlier. Sure enough, when we get to the nearby town, our drow form is able to scare off all the goblins in the area. This is enough to grant us level 3, and we reach out to the closest fiend to grab our first level in Warlock, granting a special first level spell slot that restores on short rest and a couple cantrips in the form of Eldritch Blast and Minor Illusion. Both extraordinarily useful, and since our charisma is so high, EB is a fantastic way to deal range damage. The spells we take aren't too relevant at this level, but with the fiend as our patron we gain Dark One's Blessing, which gives temp HP equal to our charisma mod plus Warlock level each time we kill anything, and we'll be doing that a lot. In a hidden basement in one of the buildings in this town, we grab an interesting looking scroll as well as a spooky book called the Necromancy of Thay. Upon using the scroll of Summon Quasit, we conjure the scintillating shovel and make the first magnanimous mistake of this run in renaming her to Fork. The reason this is so bad is because normally as a warlock we could talk to her again and gain the ability to summon her once per short rest, but the game bugs out if you name her Fork and you just don't get that option. Oh well, there's nothing we can do about it now. We just need to make sure we get the most out of her while she's here. And we do that by sending her into the grove and having her attack the strange ox. Naturally, she gets obliterated just a moment later, but that was part of the plan too. Since now we can go right up to the ox and it asks us to trade with it, allowing us to buy the Shapeshifter's Boon ring. This bad boy grants an extra 1d4 to all checks so long as we're shapeshifted, which works with our mask, but it gets even more crazy since you only need to have this ring on when you first shapeshift, meaning you could just swap it out right afterwards. And if we're smart about this, we can get what is basically a permanent 1d4 bonus to all checks. With that wonderful item gotten, we scare off every goblin between here and their camp, and when we finally arrive, the Absolute assails us with visions of her chosen 3 commanders. Thankfully, the exposition stops when this nice young stranger shows up to scare them all off with a cool Rubik's Cube before we decide to call it a night. When we awake the next day, we find we're able to absorb the parasites we've been picking up to grow even stronger, granting us the ability to unlock some illithid powers, namely Luck of the Far Realms and Favorable Beginnings. Further in the camp, we free an imprisoned Volothap, a famous and knowledgeable wizard who will be an incredible help in our journey, though likely not how you expect. Then we do some exploring and find a hidden ladder descending all the way to the depths of the Underdark, but we'll stick to the goblin camp for a bit longer before we start gallivanting around there. Mainly because we want to get a brand from one of the leaders here to convince them and any underlings that we mean no harm when secretly we mean a lot of harm. One such group of underlings is these fine fellows here, a group of ogres acting as mercenaries currently enlisted by the cult. Thanks to all of our bonuses, it's not hard to convince them to fight for us instead when we call, granting us yet more inspiration in the process. Afterwards, we check in on our other new ally back at camp, Volo, who we immediately try and steal from and fail, but this is what makes having him around so good, because he just saunters right back to where he normally stands no matter how many times we fail, meaning we have a source of unlimited gold and scrolls so long as we're patient. Later in the evening, Alfira shows up at our camp, and I know the title says Lone Wolf and so did the intro, but I think just this once we'll have a companion. Maybe she'll stick around in camp, but I mean we owe her at least that much for teaching us every instrument ever. So we let her stay and call it a night, and the next morning resume our I guess she must have been another legendary creature. Man, this place is filthy with them. Well, at least we got our inspiration. Moving on, the Burge, that's the Baldur, continues his heroic journey, saving a counselor from a burning building, though failing to save someone else, and also scaring off a whole scouting party of ghastly Githyanki with the help of a Gith disguise. Our heroic efforts get us all the way to level 4 and 2 in Warlock, which gives another Warlock spell slot, a spell in the form of Armor Vagathis, and 2 Eldritch Invocations, Agonizing Blast, and Devil's Sight. Agonizing Blast makes our range damage much more reliable, and even though it won't be our focus, it still gives us versatility. Whereas Devil's Sight makes darkness in the future a viable defensive option for when we get in a big pickle. Now that we're a bit stronger, we're feeling ready to explore the Underdark and stumble across a Myconid colony. In said colony, we talk to their sovereign spa, who lets us know all about the nearby Dwergar who've been wreaking havoc on the locals and asks us to deal with them. Since we feel like we probably used to be somewhat heroic, we agree to get around to it, but when we actually come across them in our drow disguise, it seems a good way to get some info, so we play along with their assumptions about us being on their side. It seems their main forest is just across the lake, so although their backs are turned, we steal their boat and get a sailing. Oh, and we take a quick detour to cut a deal with a false god being worshipped by a bunch of fish folk for even more experience. As we get to exploring the Dwegar HQ known as Grimforge, it's evident that most of the Dwegar don't like the absolute leader, a true soul named Nier who's managed to get himself stuck in a cave-in. So we use our mad persuasion skills combined with our roll boosting items to make a deal with them. We free Nier and they help slaughter him. Which is an extra good thing because we can smell the legendary stench wafting from where he's stuck. All we gotta do is take out the scrying eye first and foremost. Then we pop open the cave-in and get in position, when out comes sauntering the narcissistic ne'er-do-well Nier, proving just why he's gotta go. As the fight kicks off, the Dwegar defectors join on our side, though for the moment we're still a little outnumbered. It doesn't help that both Nier and his goons are able to mind control the few allies that we do have. Though when our charmed allies hit us, they break free from the control and immediately get back to destroying the enemies. We do a little shoving of our own to help turn the tides before dashing as far away from the fight as we can. Our plan works out when one of the baddies runs over to us and starts wailing, since right after he's close enough to the other patrolling guards and they join the fighting on our side. Meaning the rest of the fight sorts itself out pretty well with our allies overwhelming the enemies, and Nier not doing much at all in classic Nier fashion. He does have his legendary action, which is a sort of retaliation on every hit past the first each round, but with him being outnumbered 5-1, that's our first legendary hunt down. After the fight, we get a tadpole from his corpse, letting us unlock Concentrated Blast, not that we'll use it. Continuing on, we grab a mold for the forge up ahead, and we also sneak past some enemies so we can grab Mithril ore to use in it as well. A little further up, we find the Grim Forge itself, capable of making some really killer gear. Once everything is in place, we bring the whole platform down to where it needs to be, then we teleport back up to the top of the waypoint that we grabbed and shoot the lava valve from up there. And out comes our second legendary hunt that we could feel coming a mile away. Grym, the Guardian of the Forge. The clobbering construct can't do a darn thing to us while we're up here, so we fall into a pattern of superheating him with the lava, luring him into the center with our minor illusion, and then shooting the hammer lever to crush him. The first time this happens, a bunch of magma mephits spawn, and they can get to us, but if we make sure to move far enough away, they'll focus entirely on Grym. When they're all out of the way, we rinse and repeat with the old crush and hammer strategy on our rampant robot until he too has joined our collection of conquered creatures. With the forge clear, we grab yet another pair of mold and ore to use to make the adamantine splint armor and the adamantine shield. Both of these make us immune to critical hits, but the splint armor also has an AC of 18, reduces all damage by 2, and when we get hit in melee, our attacker is sent reeling for 3 turns, which reduces their attack rolls by 1 per turn remaining, making it all the more wild that the shield sends people reeling for 2 turns even when they miss us. These are obviously both incredible defensive gets, and it puts our AC up to a whopping 21. Elsewhere in the area, we stumble across some mimics, which we can kill by just standing up on the nearby cliff since for some reason they can't climb. I wonder how they got down there. Regardless, our addled brain has led us well since this gets us the Wondrous Gloves. Now, we're not going to be taking any levels in Bard, so part of this item is useless, but the extra 1 AC makes us even tankier, and we're getting to the point where we're nigh unhittable. These little fellas also give enough experience for level 5, and our third and final level in Warlock. This bumps our Warlock spell slots up to level 2, and gives us the ever-important Darkness spell alongside swapping out an earlier Charm person for Cloud of Daggers. Like was mentioned previously, Darkness is our get out of jail free card if we find ourselves taking on fights that we're not quite ready for otherwise. Burge also gets the Pact of the Blade, allowing us to summon or bind to weapons. These weapons then have Charisma be their main stat for attacks and damage, which means we finally have good melee options without elixirs. And since this is level 5, our proficiency bonus goes up to 3 and all of our cantrips become better, meaning Eldritch Blast now fires 2 beams. Next up, our Shattered Brain takes us over to the swamp. Call it a hunch or an urge, but something is hidden here behind all of these elementals. Indeed, with the help of an invis potion, we grab a note talking about how Kaga from the Grove is in fact colluding with some shady shadow druids. With the note in hand, we fast travel out of there before we can get caught and go to confront the lady. When we do, the shadow druids appear to wreak some havoc, but we're able to convince Kaga and the other Emerald Grove druids to join our side against them, which of course means that they get absolutely clobbered in about 30 seconds flat. Since this means the druids are trying to kill the tieflings a little little less, it also means they care about their idol a little less, so we can drag it into a cloud of darkness and then yoink it and fast travel away before anyone comes to accuse us, letting us turn the idol into Maul the Thiefling Kid in exchange for the Ring of Protection, which grants an extra +1 to AC and saving throws. For those keeping score, we're now at 23 AC by default and 25 with Shield of Faith active. This ring will be on us for pretty much the entire playthrough. Since we seem to be getting into the habit of stealing things, we also yoink this fun looking box from some folks who clearly don't want it that much. And conveniently enough, just a few minutes later, we find a lady who's willing to reward us handsomely in exchange for this box that she happened to be looking for. Mainly, this just lets us buy the Gloves of Thievery that give advantage on sleight of hand checks. We'll throw these bad boys on whenever we need to do some unsavory undercover activities. Almost as a divine reward for our progress, that cool Rubik's Cube that one girl had shows up in our pocket one evening and joins us for the rest of our journey. But now it's time to start cleaning up the goblin camp. We down an elixir of vigilance to boost initiative, as well as put on some more damaging gear with the Sword of Screams and the Caustic Band. Then we sneak up on Priestess Gut and use our Luck of the Far Realms and a Divine Smite to do a whole lot of damage. She does survive, but with a speed potion fueled cloud of daggers, she is down for the count, and with another tadpole we get Call the Weak as our newest power, an incredibly powerful damage boost. Before we go after the rest of the camp, we see a priest offering an interesting ritual, but once completed we get the Leviathar's Love permanent buff. It's nothing fancy, but it does give a little boost when we're at low health, which is when we need it the most. Afterwards, we get to clearing out the goons littering the place, so that we've got room to kite when we take on the head honchos. Thanks to our incredibly high AC, we don't really have to worry about the small fries, so long as we steer clear of the merchants at least. Before you know it, they're all largely dealt with, and we're up in the rafters fighting the legendary Dror Ragzlin and his small fry. His legendary action activates when we target an ally of our own, so it's about as irrelevant as it can get. Once again, nobody can really hit us, so we just get to shredding down all of these goblin goons until it's just this boorish booyag up on the rafters with us. And then the unthinkable happens. She throws a void bulb, something I had never seen happen before in my hundreds of hours of playing, and we fail to save and we die from full health. Let me tell ya, I was incredibly distraught. We were practically unkillable, and getting one shot feels incredibly bad, but luckily a new hero was ready to take up the mantle. I give to you the Bald Urge II, exact same build and race, just a little less hair and a lot more handsome. We do everything again in basically the same order, with some minor exceptions, such as not renaming Shovel to Fork so we can actually resummon her. And we take a few more rests, which means this grotesque gremlin from our past shows up to offer us a cool cape as a reward for killing all those legendary creatures, specifically Alfira. Before you say anything, I know it's extremely optimal to use in lone wolf runs, but I don't enjoy using it, so I'm not going to. Either way, now we're back up to the rafters in Dror's room, but this time we've got Featherfall active, so we can't get one shot. Burge II starts to get revenge on all the baddies by just shoving them down and getting the odd Eldritch Blast on Dror himself. By the time he actually reaches us up here, he's just low enough for a critical 2nd level smite to obliterate him, and we've got a 3rd trophy for our continuing collection. It takes a little while to clean up the rest of the goons, but with Featherfall active for the whole time, we've got nothing to worry about. Before continuing on, we also grab Psionic Backlash using the tadpole we got from Dror for a nice bit of extra damage and a way to use our reaction reliably. When we're ready, we send in Shovel to grab the attention of the last goblin leader, Minthara, and then we just start shooting her from on top of a nearby wall. She does eventually catch up to our Quasit companion and take them out, but she doesn't seem to know how to get up to us afterwards, so we can just shoot her a few times and take her out once and for all. For killing her, we get arguably one of the greatest boosts to our survivability in the entire run, the Boots of Striding. These little booties give us a minor speed boost whenever we start concentrating on a spell, but more importantly make it so we can't be knocked prone or forcibly moved so long as we're concentrating. I'm sure you could guess why we'd want an item like this, and it pairs phenomenally with Shield of Faith, which lasts until a long rest. We also get yet another illithid power in the form of Force Tunnel, which will be very nice now and then. Moving on, when we get back to camp, the druid Halsin is there to greet us and thank us for defeating the goblins. Unfortunately, he can't help us with our parasite problem, but he does tell us where more legendary creatures are to be found. Moonrise Towers, the absolutist headquarters. It's good to know about, but that means heading to the Shadowcursed lands, and there's still more we want to do here. But now that the goblins are gone, we can head to the mountain pass and buy the Periapt of Wound Closure from Lady Esther. We'll be wearing this amulet for pretty much the entire run, since its effect of maxing out any healing we receive, including from potions, is just so darn strong and makes healing stress-free. At the nearby temple, we find some Gith who are looking for some sort of weapon and interrogating the few absolute cultists that remain. We're able to sneak inside their crush using a hidden entrance so as to not attract attention and grab the waypoint so we can come back later. Because first, we'd like to go fulfill Sovereign Spa's request and destroy the Dwergar by the lake. It's really not too hard for us, especially with the help of the Defender Flail which we acquired from the crush and will be using temporarily. Upon reporting back to the Sovereign, he gives us Bliss Spores till our next rest, basically giving an extra 1d6 to all rolls, meaning we're now prepared to head back to the crush and plop ourselves in their resident Brain Blaster, since our cranial trauma seems to have done wonders for us in the past. This little machine has us making 3 saving throws, 1 for each mental stat, but with all of our bonuses coming from the Bliss Spores, an Elixir of Heroism, and Bless, as well as our Gnome Cunning, we have no problem in passing them all. Burge does blow up a little bit because of this, but it's well worth it since from here on out all of our Illithid powers are going to be using a bonus action instead of an action. Oh, and 3 more tadpoles in this room give us Psionic Overload, Stage Fright, and Repulsor to further improve ourselves and destroy our brain even more since we're becoming more and more convinced that the brain trauma is actually the source of all of our power. With power in tow, our addled brain directs us to the next target on our legendary list, a harmless old lady living in the swamp who's kidnapped a young woman. Although it does turn out that she's not so harmless, but she is rightfully afraid and runs deep into her basement, leaving us to break her raging redcaps in the meanwhile. And we also rumble and tumble our way through some like-minded confused cronies in the basement. None of us know how we got here, but one of us is leaving. When we finally get down to the bottom, Burge pops an invisibility potion to free the young woman Mayrina while staying hidden. Then we use darkness where we're pretty sure the hideous hag is hiding. Afterwards, we try to reveal her with an alchemist fire and miss, but get her with the second one. Her legendary action and all the fire makes this a bit tedious since whenever we cast Eldritch Blast, she summons another clone and shuffles her location. But she can't actually target us while we're in the darkness, and we've got speed potions galore to make this go by fast enough that we don't need to worry about running out of spell slots. Once she gets knocked down to below 30 HP, she offers us a deal. Ethel will give us power in exchange for letting her go with Mayrina. We're here to absolutely dominate these legendary creatures though, so we intimidate her into giving us both Mayrina and the power-up, meaning we get a permanent +1 to our charisma, setting it up to 18 and our modifier to +4, basically making every single thing that we do better. We also get a little trinket called Bitter Divorce in the back room, which we use to resurrect Mayrina's husband Connor, though not as intact as she'd originally hoped. To spare her the tragedy of having to travel alongside her undead spouse, we take the burden onto ourselves. Our sixth sense then leads us towards a spider cave in search of yet another triumphant trophy. We've just got to get past some run-of-the-mill spiders first. Afterwards, we find ourselves in the den of the Phase Spider Matriarch, and since her legendary action entombs anyone who attacks her hatchlings, we make sure to destroy all of the eggs first from stealth. Then we destroy a web the Matriarch is standing on, making her take a ton of fall damage before the fight kicks off proper. As soon as we get a turn, we blow on Lump's Bonehorn, and no, that's not a euphemism, it summons our ogre allies as distractions. Then we drop our arachnid amiga right on top of one of her underlings, almost killing both. The ogres start putting in the legwork, so to speak, on one of the spiders. Well, the queen does her darndest to get back at us. But a moment later, the last little goon goes down, and with just the big lady herself left, she doesn't stand much of a chance at all. And to make a good hunt even better, we convince the ogres to join us for yet another fight in the future. There's also this super cool shiny rock we grab that Burge promptly jams into the Necromancy of Thay book that we grabbed earlier to pop it open. After a series of saving throws that we're pretty darn good at are succeeded, this gives us some forbidden knowledge, and by that I mean the forbidden knowledge permanent buff, boosting our wisdom saving throws and wisdom checks for the rest of the run by a +1, which one might start to call overkill if you believe in having too much of a good thing. We take a quick break from the legendary hunt to eradicate the local gnoll population, just as a little treat, since their ears can make us run real quick, aka we can make speed potions out of them. And one of them has a tadpole that lets us unlock ability drain, which is an important piece for this build for reasons that you'll see later. Then the hunt continues. Sorta. Burge talks to Sovereign Glut, a misplaced Myconid in the Underdark who's down to whoop some booty by our side. He has the remarkable ability to reanimate pretty much anything under his control, including this mighty Minotaur we slew a moment ago. With the squad in tow, including Connor, we chase down the Boulette, who really feels like they should be a legendary creature, but if they have a legendary action, it never made an appearance. Either way, we get to some Boulette brawling and land a couple good hits, but for the most part it's a comedy of errors where we miss and miss and miss again. All the while the Boulette wastes its turns going after our Minotaur pal, which we can always get another of, till eventually a couple more misses seals the deal and the bullet vanishes underground to heal up and run away elsewhere in the Underdark. It's not too tricky to track it down though, and when we do catch up to it, we get quite the drop on it. It continues to largely ignore us, so we can get all of our bad luck out of the way while it wails on the Minotaur, till eventually we land one more hit that we turn into a crit smite and obliterate it with. We don't get much of a reward from this fight, but along the way to our next hunt, we find the bestest boy Scratch out in the wild and leave him our scent so we can join our ever-expanding hunting party when he wants. Hey, do you remember those two strangers we convinced to avenge their brother by killing an owlbear earlier? Yeah, turns out they've just been waiting for us to show up for like a week, and now that we're here, it's rumbling time. To make things even more interesting, we decide to summon our ogre mercenaries to have a fun little free-for-all. Then we just cast darkness in the corner to let everyone else work things out. Shovel puts the fear of God into this owlbear with a 4 damage hit, causing her to summon her mate using her legendary action. The cultists meanwhile just kinda mess with the ogres, which is funny at first, but we want this fight to move along, so we eradicate both of them with an EB. It becomes pretty clear pretty fast that the owlbears are gonna win this fight as they take out a couple of the ogres, so we start blasting away at them to ensure they don't win by too much. And when the last ogre falls, both of the owlbears are nice and low, just as we'd hoped. They do try to hit us, but between the darkness blinding them and our incredible AC, they get no such luck, leaving them ripe for a good divine smite on one, and a stage fright on the other, causing them to finish themselves off. Still counts as our kill though. You know, we've done a lot of killing, and it's about time we get some more brain damage to power up, so we head to the Myconid colony where we find a friendly mind flayer willing to help us out if we gather the right ingredients. So we head to the nearby abandoned arcane tower and pick up an anti-magic flower, just to turn off the security measures to allow us to explore the rest of it as well. Whereupon we grab the ingredients we need for our liquid form mind melter, do a little bit of light reading, and head to the roof where we find this tower is not as abandoned as we thought. But after a brief rap battle against our automated opponent Bernard, he relaxes and considers us his superior. He is a legendary creature though, and we would love to collect a trophy from him, so we hop to it with a divine smite crit, only to follow it up with a bonus action repulsor, defenestrating this dunce all the way to the ground where he instantly dies. That was certainly easy. The remaining mechanical mob literally can't hit us because our AC is simply too high for them, and we've got crit immunity, so even nat 20s don't do a thing, letting us just take him out one by one while they stand about with less movement than a shooting gallery. Besides another head mounted on our wall, we also get a down the mind melter as a reward, and our theory continues to be proven as we get the survival instinct power for doing this. It's nothing crazy, but more survivability is always nice to have. Now our brain is as addled as it could possibly get, for now, which means we're as powerful as we can get, and there's one more legendary hunt for us to do. Thankfully it takes place in the creche, and there's a little puzzle that we solve near the roof by putting a warhammer, a mace, and a battle axe on these little pedestals that grants the Morning Lord's radiance upon completion. This is a nice bit of extra radiant damage on our melee attacks so long as we're in the area, until our next long rest at least. We also grab a little emblem that belonged to the previous owners of this temple, and with as much bravery as we can muster, we head to the bottom of the creche to find Inquisitor Wargaz, who's very interested in our astral artifact, as is his false god Lich Queen Vlaakith, who tells us there's someone inside of our artifact who they really want dead, and we're not really in a position to refuse, so we acquiesce. Once we do get inside, we find the person who's been appearing in our dreams. Apparently they're real, and not just real, but they've been using some sort of power to protect us from being turned into a mind flayer, which means for better or worse they're on our side, for now at least, but our brain tells us to not trust them entirely. Choosing to not kill them means they reward us with a bless effect for the upcoming fight, and we also prep by conjuring Shovel and Connor as decoys. When we step outside, the fight kicks off, our final legendary showdown, and we instantly get shot in the face, though thankfully not for much. Another enemy tries to hit us with a psychic blast, but our mind has grown strong at resisting trauma, and we've got a psychic resistance elixir active to boot. Shovel gets to bullying one of the ghastly Gith, and we see Wargaz's legendary action in, well, action. Twice per round when something happens to him or his goons, he summons a Mind Claw that deals psychic damage, and if they hit, the big man can leech off their target to gain more power and make that person vulnerable to the Psychic. Shovel gets got herself a moment later, and we resort to hiding in darkness and using speed potions to take out the goons as fast as we can. Connor also gets obliterated a moment later, but we're able to get some sort of vengeance by taking out yet another crony. One big problem that we're having is the Mind Claws can't be blinded and love swinging at us, but this problem is largely negated by the fact that we have 26 AC from all of our items and speed pots. Over the next few turns, we focus on taking out some more goons, but by the time we do, our Darkness Cloud is more of a Mind Claw cloud, so we get focusing on the big man in the hopes to stop this madness. Nicely enough, the claws don't actually make opportunity attacks, but they do still threaten us, giving disadvantage on EBs if we're near them, so each turn is a little puzzle on how to hit with Wargaz. After a while of this tedium, he is nice and low, so we trigger an opportunity attack from him so he doesn't have a reaction to parry a Divine Smite crit finisher. And then the remaining lackey does by far the most damage out of the whole fight to us, before we show him the Wrath of Burge 2. Laying on the corpse of one of these terrible thugs is the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, our new long-term helmet. This dangerous diadem grants us the Arcane Synergy condition for 2 turns when we inflict a condition, which is basically guaranteed every turn thanks to ability drain. For the uninitiated, Arcane Synergy makes our weapon attacks deal extra damage equal to our spellcasting mod, which, as you guessed it, is Charisma. Comboing with Pact of the Blade, this means our weapons add twice our Charisma mod to their damage, increasing our output by a lot. In a side passage that was hidden, we find a secret route leading deeper in where we can almost see the impressive power pouring out. At the end of this hallway, a weapon befitting the Bald Urge awaits, but to make sure none of the security measures blow us up, we pop in the emblem that we got earlier first. With that, we're able to obtain the wondrous weapon that we'll be using for almost the entirety of the rest of the run, the Blood of Lathander. The divine power flowing through this +3 mace gives it a lot of extra effects, mainly letting us use a sunbeam once per long rest for free, giving a chance to blind all nearby fiends and undead, which will be very useful soon. And once per long rest, if we get reduced to 0 health, it instead heals us and anyone nearby. This last effect is the reason why we hold on to it so tightly. While there is more damaging weapons, the chance to avoid an unforeseen killing blow is incredibly hard to give up on. Feeling more powerful and having our brain more fractured than ever before, we know for sure that if we weren't a big game hunter before we lost our memory, we certainly are now. And as we head off to the Shadowcurse lands through Grimforge, we just can't wait to see all the trophies that will adorn our walls next. Thank you all so much for watching. This act alone was definitely a hard challenge, and I had to play it a little differently than normal, but I still hope you found yourself enjoying it. Stay tuned for the next couple acts in a few weeks since I'll be out of town. Thanks again, and as always, a special thanks to our Storyteller tier members, Bunny Warren, Player 5, Damon, Larry Renzokukin, Shirtles, Blaze Lays, LaFay, Mark Rainbow, Vivian, Garrett Sapp, Rat King, Lovely Velvet, Joe Mama, and Apricot Antlers.